welcome to the version 1 Microsoft product license terms update for December 2024. Hey Neve, hey William, how are you today?
Hey
Good, thank
Carl,
you.
good thanks.
Good. So, as you could guess, this month is kind of light. A few last minute additions to the terms as well. So, yeah, who wants to go first with what they've been looking at?
I'll go first.
Okay, good.
So yeah, I had a look at the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, where they've added Defender for Endpoint F1 and F2 to the MCA availability table this month. So previously was available on the EA, EAS, etc. And just Defender for Endpoint F1 and F2 is exactly the same as Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 and Plan 2, but naturally it is aligned to the frontline workers, right? So all the usual criteria apply in terms of eligibility. And then the other one that I looked at as well was the Microsoft 365, where they've updated the prerequisites for Microsoft Defender vulnerability management. And I guess like some of the key prerequisites there, it's more kind of technical, I think, from just looking at what they've outlined. Essentially, the devices that are covered by Defender Vulnerability Management must be onboarded to Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, or the Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, etc. Devices have to be running on supported operating systems. And also it needs to have enhanced kind of integration with Intune and Configuration Manager for the likes of kind of effective threat remediation. So that was kind of interesting. And then the other thing that that was outside of the product terms, and that was the announcement that Microsoft are discontinuing Viva Goals from the Viva suite of services. And essentially what Viva Goals was just a component of the Microsoft Employee Experience Platform, or EXP. And it was just kind of a dashboard visualizing key performance indicators, for employee kind of projects, trends, objectives, etc. And essentially, the reason why they've decided to discontinue it is because there was very little take up on the service. So it sounds like it probably won't be missed by the vast majority of Microsoft customers. And that's it.
Very good. I'll go next. So I looked at all things Azure primarily this month. And obviously then there's separate from the product terms updates, there was some announcements around the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement program towards the end of November, I think it was. So I'll touch on that as well, but I think that's pretty widely publicized. But in terms of the product terms, so few updates, again, nothing that material in play here. The Azure Communication Services, or ACS, that provides APIs, tools for developers to integrate voice, I think it is, voice chat and other communications features into applications that are hosted on Azure or other platforms. So Microsoft in December introduces a clear restriction that specifies ACS must only be used for business purposes. The second update was around Fabric, actually. So this one was around the workload hub in Fabric, which is like a central repository and management interface where users can explore, discover, explore, manage various different workloads within the Fabric environment. So this month sees the introduction of terms that specify that publisher workloads offered through Workload Hub are deemed to be non-Microsoft products. So more language changes than anything else. And then just around updated pricing terms. So I guess you could say there's a simplification of the pricing terms within the Azure terms. So December update simplifies that by consolidating the fixed pricing exclusions for Azure reservations, Azure Spot, and ACS into one single clause. Also the introduction of FX rate adjustments. So in December, we see Microsoft explicitly acknowledge that pricing may include foreign exchange rate adjustments. That can potentially go in your favor or not in your favor, depending on your local currency and how that is pegged against the dollar, as far as I'm aware, is where the FX rate is primarily driven from these days. Also, just to add into the mix then around Azure AI speech, custom text to speech, avatar to limited access services. So this was just some new language that was added into the terms from that. There was nothing really in there that exciting in this month's product terms. I'll flick over to the recent announcements around the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement Program. So anybody who's working within the software asset management industry or licensing industry will have seen, quite a lot of noise in the marketplace around the communication that Microsoft made sometime towards the end of November, if I got that right, around how customers will no longer be able to renew certain types of enterprise agreements. And some of the language around what certain types of enterprise agreements, what that means, is a little bit ambiguous, I would say. But I think it'll probably be, customers who are primarily just purchasing cloud services and don't have any sort of a significant on-premise license demand within their agreement will probably be suitable targets, I would imagine, for migration away from the enterprise agreement program. So what does that look like? Microsoft's primary route to market for this change is going to be the MCAE model, which is very similar to MCA Breadth, which many of you will know as CSP. So I think over the next 12 months, starting from next year, from January, customers who are approaching the end of their enterprise agreement will have to do some really careful evaluation if they're being approached by Microsoft and been advised that they need to move to a new licensing vehicle away from the enterprise agreement program. It's really important that customers understand not only the risks and the benefits associated with these changes, but that they, I would say, leverage the importance of leveraging some form of third party or independent support is going to be hugely important to help them guide, provide a pathway that helps them understand what's the best fit for their organization in terms of what that licensing structure change might look like. So, for example, if you're moving away from an enterprise agreement, there's a potential loss. If you have software in there with software assurance, there's going to be a loss of software assurance if you're moving to an MCA contracting vehicle, because software assurance isn't in there. So, that could impact in terms of the product use rights that you get specific to software assurance, which could indirectly create non-compliance risks, or in some cases might actually result in the need to purchase new or different types of licenses. So, that evaluation is going to be key to help understand where those potential nuances are between moving from one contracting vehicle to another, but it also might lay that foundation to push back and provide clarity as to when and where the enterprise agreement still makes commercial or operational sense to your business, I would say. So, keep an eye out on that one. I know we've been pushing out quite a lot of content around the enterprise agreement in terms of case studies, and we've also just published some content around our own internal success story around how we've managed and renewed our own internal enterprise agreements. So, very much a case of drinking our own champagne on that one, but some really good, interesting insights on that. So I think as we look into 2025, there's definitely going to be a change in the landscape out there with enterprise agreement customers. Another important facet to take into account there is that MCAE is going to be bringing agreements back in-house into Microsoft and removing them from the hands of LSPs. And to be fair, there's quite a lot of really good LSPs out there who've been providing great licensing advice over the last 10, 20 years, particularly licensing veterans who've been working with customers for a long period of time. If you're moving those agreements away from those LSPs, there's a risk that customers are going to miss out on that great licensing advice, and that's, I guess, where an organization like VersionOne could potentially help organizations fill that gap if you are moving into that MCAE model. And I think just one other final point to make on that is that the MCA model is an evergreen agreement, and I think that in itself creates a lot of risks for many organizations, because it does reduce the ability to potentially negotiate with Microsoft over the long term. but it also, I think, can create this feeling of an all-you-can-eat buffet, because now you're removing that traditional annual true-up mechanism, which was for organizations that didn't really do a good job of staying on top of their assets over a 12-month period. It was that big compelling event where people could take a step back, take stock of what they actually had, what they actually needed, and that will be removed somewhat from the MCAE and within reason within CSP as well. So I think, there's really an important play here for both ITAM and FinOps to ensure that customers aren't just rolling over on entitlements that they might not necessarily need, but that they also have that ongoing visibility to try and understand where is there better ways to license Microsoft technology. Because although it might be perceived that things are getting a little bit easier in terms of trying to understand licensing terms over the last number of years, I think in reality that's quite a different story with customers, and there's still a huge potential to optimize how you license Microsoft technology now and into the future. So that was the updates from my side. So some light updates on Fabric, Azure, and then just that that big update around towards the end of last month with the enterprise agreement. So I'll hand it over to you, William, if you want to go through a few the remainders, and there's a couple of other things caught your eye, I think, this month outside of the terms.
Almost like the after the Lord Mayor show, but thanks. So the first one is the Azure HCI stack. That's changed its name to Azure Local. So this was the hyper-converged infrastructure solution that basically sat on premises and connected to Azure to create that hybrid environment for that sort of seamless interoperability between client site and the cloud. And along with that name change, there's an updated privacy and security terms to state that Microsoft will be a controller of personal data when the customer turns on collection of Windows diagnostic data as described in their documentation. When Microsoft is the controller, it will handle the personal data in accordance with the published privacy statement and data processing terms, but the actual data processing agreement terms do not apply when Microsoft is the actual controller of that personal data. So it's a bit confused, but essentially they're saying they will control personal data but not be responsible for it. The second piece, which isn't it's more of a terms update. So Microsoft are changing the way that Microsoft Copilot Studio is built to bring in a consumption model as well as the per message model. So this is the Power Virtual Agent, or what was Power Virtual Agent. At the moment, it's $200 for 25,000 messages, a message being one prompt and one answer. Unused messages can't be carried across, or quotas can't be carried across the next month at the moment, but that will be changing to a per message consumption cost as an option with no flat rate fee. So whilst the price of entry is lower, the equivalent cost of each message, being one prompt, one answer, will double, near enough double under that model. But it provides another option. User licenses will remain free of charge, but still need to be assigned to those active users. The third piece is OneDrive. So in January 2025, all unlicensed OneDrive accounts that are active but unlicensed for 93 days will be moved automatically to the recycle bin and then into permanent deletion thereafter, or they will be archived if they fall under retention policy. So if they're archived because they have a legal retention policy on them, access to files will require reactivation, and therefore a OneDrive license cost will be applied for that privilege. So that's one thing to bear in mind for joiners, movers, leavers, that sort of thing. There's an awful lot of OneDrive accounts that are sitting there without users assigned, which are dormant essentially. So, but they will become a licensable item from January. And the final one is price harmonization, as you touched on, Carl, with the exchange rate mechanism. Microsoft reserved the right to review this twice yearly and update local currency pricing against the dollar. So the good news is from 1st of February 2025, customers in the pound sterling region, so UK data centers, Microsoft 365 and Azure renewals will see a 5 to 6% price decrease from this date. So that's good news, but on the take with one, give with the other, vice versa. from the 1st of April, there will be a 5% increase in the annual commitment subscriptions, which are paid monthly. So that's your Microsoft 365, etc. So there's a window of opportunity before April where we could help customers box clever and lock in pricing subscriptions before the annual commitment subscription paid monthly update cost update comes into play. And that will lock in the price for 12 months if you secure one subscription title or one quantity of one for those titles before the 1st of April to lock in that pricing. And that was me.
Great stuff. So I think that pretty much wraps us up for this month's update, which is the final update of this year. And I think we're coming up on our 3rd year anniversary next year of consistently keeping our customers and internal version 1 stakeholders up to date on all things Microsoft and all the subtle changes that take place each month. So I know we often say that that there's no material impact or material changes, but I think by understanding these subtle changes as you go has a huge importance, because it's often only after the fact that these things have an impact. And so it's great to be able to present some of these insights as we've gone through the last 12 months. So thanks, Niamh. Thanks, William, for another year of product updates. So as always, if you have any Microsoft licensing queries that you're needing some support on, trying to get your head around and better understand, feel free to reach out to the version 1 software asset management practice. Or for that matter, if you have any other software licensing product related queries, be it Oracle, IBM, to name a few, or any others, feel free to reach out to us here. We'd be delighted to help you with any complex licensing conundrums that you're trying to get to the bottom of. So until next month's update, thanks and have a great Christmas and a good New Year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.